Hi everyone, welcome back to Elle McNicoll's lockdown writing class. I hope you're well. I know this is half term, which is why we didn't have a video on Friday, so you might not be watching this when the video goes out, but maybe you're back, who knows, or maybe you just want to do some writing over half term, in which case you're in the right place. So I want to shout out, before we get started on dialogue today, I wanted to shout out to a very phenomenal student who's been emailing in some incredible things over the last couple of weeks, which is Abu Bakar, and you said it was okay for me to say your name. So thank you for your emails. Your show Don't Tell was great. It was so good. You got my gist exactly. You did a great job. And you also asked a question. You asked about how writers write, really, and do we write in a notebook or do we write on Google Drive or Microsoft Word? And I had to think about it, and really this is going to be different for everyone, and what I would encourage you to think about is what works best for you. There's no rules. Some people probably, I don't know anyone who does, but some people probably still do write by hand, which is what people used to do. Some people maybe still use typewriters. I feel like Stephen King uses a typewriter. Maybe I made that up. But what I like to do is I don't like to write my work, whether it's a first draft or a final draft, by hand. I have very poor motor skills, my hands shake a lot, and I have very bad handwriting, which is almost impossible to read, so it's not helpful for me to do that. But what I do is write ideas down in this notebook. Let's see if I have something I can show you. Top secret, yes. So like I'll write like, there you go, you can see a little bit of a breakdown there, chapter by chapter breakdown. I'll write the initial idea for a story down, and I'll write it down and then I'll leave it alone, and if it keeps coming back in my head then I know it's time to put it into a computer. So I like to take notes by hand. I don't like taking notes electronically. Some people take notes on their phone, that's fine, not for me. I like to write notes by hand, and I like to write the drafts on a computer. That's how I do it, but there's no set rule. There's absolutely no rule at all, whether you prefer writing by hand, by computer. Maybe you record what you want to write down. Maybe, I don't know, there's a million ways to do it, and whichever way it works for you is the best way. I hear lots of people I know do use Google Drive, or Google Docs, sorry. I don't, I use Microsoft Word, I'm very old fashioned. But anyhow, thank you very much for your question, Abu Bakar, and thank you for your incredible, taking part since day one, all of you. I've had some incredible responses to show and tell, and you all absolutely got what I was talking about, so I guess that's a good thing, and it just shows how fantastic you all are, so well done. This week we're going to be doing dialogue. I know I say this every week, but this is a really important one. Dialogue is my favourite thing to do. It's my favourite thing to read. It's my favourite thing to watch on film. I love dialogue, and the saddest thing about being in lockdown and being super safe and staying, locked in a room, and I am locked in this room, is I don't get to hear people out and about having conversations. I love to eavesdrop on people's conversations and listen into what people are talking about. If someone's on the phone, on the bus, I like to listen into what they say. I like just hearing people whose voices and whose speech and whose vocabulary is completely different to mine, and thinking about the things that they say, occasionally writing something down if you hear someone say something interesting. So dialogue is all, I mean, you guys know what dialogue is. A monologue is one person speaking by themselves. A monologue is usually like a speech. Dialogue is two people speaking, or more. So when someone says, let's have a dialogue, they mean let's have a conversation. So dialogue, we're talking about when characters talk to each other. Although I love a monologue. Where's Spark? Spark's got a monologue in it, as does Show. They both have monologues, but they also have a lot of dialogue. And what I think you want to achieve with dialogue is, well, it depends actually. Maybe you want to achieve hyperrealism. Maybe you want it to seem very colloquial and like it's a transcription, meaning like you've recorded real people and then written down what they've said, so it's super realistic. There's a little bit of that in Spark with the sisters. They use slang, they interrupt each other, they use the word like I just did. It's written in a quite colloquial way to really capture that their sort of teenage speech, the way they talk. And so that's a choice. You might want to be super realistic. Or you might want to be a little bit more stylized. So, you know, show is science fiction. The stakes are a little bit higher. There's a little bit more kind of, not supernatural stuff going on because we talked about that in genre, but sort of mysterious stuff going on. So the language is a little bit heightened. And in the final act of show, so the last, I'm not going to say 20 minutes because everyone reads at different speeds, but the last third, let's say, of show, it's pretty non-stop. There's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of plot unfolding and a lot of action, and the dialogue is the most important part, I would say, of that unfolding, although there's a lot of internal, you know, monologue going on as well. But the dialogue is what really, I can't say it without giving away the book, but it's what really brings everything together and really kind of has this huge climactic moment. So I cannot stress how important dialogue is, and the only way to get really good at dialogue is to practice and to listen to other people. And what you want to do is, I mean, it's really part of characterization dialogue. You want all the characters to sound different. You want them all to have their own voice, so it doesn't feel like it's the same voice over and over again. Again, in show has artificial intelligence in it, so there are holograms, and they are obviously not human and they're not real, but the whole point of the holograms in show is that they are in a institution called the Pomegranate Institute, and the whole point about them is that they are supposed to look so like humans and sound so like humans that nobody notices the difference. So I didn't have to do that kind of robotic AI Siri Alexa type voice. They had to sound very, very human. So that was, you know, dialogue was a huge part of that, a huge part of making the artificially intelligent beings sound like real people. So dialogue, I mean, the best advice I can give is to go and eavesdrop on people, but again, we're in lockdown, so it's best not. But what is good is to, if you're like me and you have a notebook, wherever you take your notes, and I cannot recommend note-taking enough because we're building up everything that we need to put into our draft, is if someone says something curious, something that you maybe wouldn't say, write it down, because you can give it to a character. I cannot stress how important it is that everyone has a different voice. So what's something that I can, my boyfriend, for example, whenever something sort of silly happens or something unfortunate happens, my boyfriend always says, "Wow, that's bad news bears," which I think is the most ridiculous thing. He always goes, "It's bad news bears," and I just think that's something I would never say. So I wrote it down one day. I was like, one day I'm going to have a character that says that's bad news bears, because that's not something I would ever say. So it's really good to take notes about funny little expressions people use. Dialects. So dialects are how people from different regions of the world speak. So somebody in Newcastle speaks very differently from somebody in London. Somebody from Scotland, where I am from, speaks very differently. I mean, there's so many different dialects in Scotland. You know, we all speak differently. So think about whether or not your character has a dialect. I am not a huge fan of writers that write the dialects phonetically, you know, where if the character's from London and they don't say their H's, then the writer will drop off the H. I don't like writing that phonetically. I prefer dialects to kind of come through language and through choice of words rather than that. I think that's cheating a little bit. And they never do it to posh people. Posh people never have their dialect phonetically written out. Even though they say things like oaf. They go, "Oh, that's a little bit off," which sounds so strange to me. So think about the language you use if your character has a dialect. How are you going to show that they're from somewhere else without being stereotypical? You know, people from Ireland don't actually say "top of the morning" to you, but they do say how's himself when they're talking about, you know, somebody like. So think about specifics of people who are from who don't talk the way you talk, because there's nothing worse than reading a book where every single character sounds the same. It's really no fun at all. So make notes about the things that you hear people say. You know, it can be on the television, it can be in your house, it can be in your street. Just pay attention to how people speak and the dialogues that they employ in their own life. And when it comes to writing scenes, this is the advice that, unfortunately, this is the reason I can't write my work in a coffee shop or in a diner. I can't write in public because I talk to myself. If I have a scene with multiple people talking, or, you know, two people talking, I talk out loud. I think about the intention of the scene and what this character is trying to say, and I, you know, like some kind of strange actor, I put myself in that character's head and I try and talk like them. which makes me look deranged. I look like, I mean, this is why I have to lock myself in this room and tell, my boyfriend, don't come in and turn my phone off and just talk. And it really does help me. That really is a tip, is talking to yourself. I can't tell you how much I talked to myself when I was writing the show. I mean, it was just, this is a whole book of delusions. Like, it's just all me just talking to myself. But I do really recommend it. It really does help. So, dialogue. What I want you to do for homework is I want you to write a dialogue scene between 2 or more characters. And what I don't want you to worry about, I just want you to write what they say. You don't even have to name them. It can be A and B, and just write the scene. And what I want you to do, if you could jump off the scene that we did last week when we were talking about subtext, remember that? But I just want you to write as if you're writing a play. When you read a play, you read the dialogue, and there's a couple of stage directions, but that's it. The dialogue is all that really exists in a play when you read it, and that's why it has to be read out loud. You can't read a play to yourself. If you're doing any kind of theatre or reading a play at school, you have to read it out loud. That's what it's meant to be, that's how it's meant to be done. So I want you to just write some dialogue. Absolutely, just dialogue. Don't worry about he said, she said, don't worry about adverbs. All that good stuff can come later. Just write some dialogue as if you were writing a play. And it'd be great if you could factor in, maybe the characters that you did earlier in our lessons, or maybe it's coming off with the subtext we did last week, I don't know, but that would be great. Yeah, so, chosen book this week, where have I put it? Right here. High Rise Mystery by Sharna Jackson. We mentioned this in genre because it's a detective murder mystery between 2 kids that are solving a murder, their art teacher's murder, on their estate called The Try. And it's such a great example of voice. Remember we talked about voice, but also dialogue. The kids in this, they talk like kids I know in my own life. Sometimes when I read books with kids in them, not usually written by children's authors, usually written by adult book authors, they write children very strangely and they don't sound like human beings. And of course that's all children are. They're just human beings, and every child is different and they're as diverse and as eclectic as adults. And I think Sharna really captures some incredible personalities in Nick and Norva with the dialogue especially, and they remind me of kids that I used to teach when I was a singing teacher. So it's a really great story as well, and it's great fun, but it's a good example of dialogue. And last but not least, right, let me just get, there's this bookshop has letters in their name, and they reached out and said, if there's any space in the bookshop recs, we'd love to be considered. And I actually really love them because of their website, and they have an incredible selection of books, and they're independent, and they are P&G Wells in Winchester. So thank you, P&G Wells in Winchester. Great website, like I said. Give them a look if you're wanting to buy some books from a great independent. So why am I always out of breath when I do these things? Like, I just get so I don't know what it is. It's very early, maybe that's it. But thank you so much. Let's see, is there any good news I can share? Kind of Spark has been nominated for the Branford Bowes Award, which is pretty cool, and it's also been nominated for the Blue Peter Book Award. It's one of 3 books nominated for the Blue Peter Book Award, and that's pretty cool because I loved Blue Peter when I was a kid. So that's some good news. The show is out in less than 3 weeks. It's out on World Book Day, and I am terrified. So anyway, if you want to pre-order it, I'll love you forever. Okay. Friday, we're doing Villain Antagonist. I have been looking forward to Villain Antagonist for a long time, and it might be a long video because there's a lot to say. It's very important, but I can't wait to see you there. You might still not be back from half term by then, but that's okay. The video is going to stay up. It's going to be there regardless. I can't wait. So Villain Antagonist on Friday, and then we have only 3 classes left after that. We do Villain Antagonist, then we do editing and the publishing process. If you have any questions, let me know because I'll be answering them. And then we're going to do what kind of writer do you want to be, which is our penultimate session. And then we're going to do putting it all together on Monday the 1st of March, and that will be our last session. So thank you so much. See you on Friday for Villain Antagonist. Bye.